Sugar, sugar, da 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 da. Oh, honey, honey, da 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 da. You are my candy girl. Oh. Anyway, we are talking about sugar. Big surprise for Sweet Freedom. I wanted to clear up some clarifications about the Sweet Freedom approach and why we choose certain sugars and not. So, one of the things that happens is we get a lot of research and people get these findings and they get really excited and then they put them all over the place in media and people report on them and they start trends. And then what we find is that there might be some other research that counteracts or contradicts that not long after or many years later. With Return to Food and the Sweet Freedom approach, we are fad free in the sense that science will always come up with things and reasons to have one food over another food, that kind of thing, depending on what your bias is, where your skew is. You know, you're going to accept certain research and refute other research. What I do know for sure is Aristotle said nature does nothing uselessly, and that nature has been around for much longer than our approach to science and our relationship with food. And it's really controversial. But ever since we started to just make our decisions based on science, as opposed to trusting our body and learning and understanding and appreciating how nature works, our relationship with food has become unhinged. What I truly believe is that nature trumps our present view of the situation right now. And so whenever I'm in doubt, I just go back to what would I do in a natural environment? So when coming to making decisions about food, there might be sugars that are lower in glycemic index that don't spike the blood sugar like more natural sugars do. And in my opinion, if they are not natural, if they go through several processes using toxic chemicals, refining and removing precious nutrients till you end up with this clear white substance, or any clear white substance, it's not good for the body, it's not good for the planet. I've not seen information presented to me that really contradicts that philosophy in a way that is truly credible. Because most of the science out there that supports these white products is very much industry influenced. I learned this at my time when I was the Victorian Chair of Nutrition Australia and speaking at dietitians conferences and working within the media and on television to see how things actually work and information gets out there. So if you're wanting to get a really simple idea of how we would actually consume sugars in nature, you need to start to observe the seasons and understand how plants actually produce their sugars. So fruit sugars are produced within the fruit. And as you see here, a fruit that's very popular right now to use for sugar are dates. Now, Medjool dates are big rage right now, and they are fabulous. They're totally sweet. They're like having a caramel on their own, but they don't come in nature just like this. The Medjool dates are actually boiled and dried. They're softened so that flesh around it is slightly softened, and they can actually spike your blood sugar. So with Sweet Freedom, it's not about the absence of sugar in our life. And the truth is that very few people who have a rounded, healthy relationship with food, who have things like dates in their life, have a problem with dates. It's not the dates. It's usually the things, the hidden sugars or the highly refined sugars, where we start to overconsume. I don't know about you, but I can't eat too many dates. And if you are consuming too many dates, it's because you're actually shutting off your body's mechanisms, consciously or subconsciously. Now, with refined sugar and things like high fructose corn syrup, those highly processed syrups and sugars, it can actually turn off the function in your brain that tells you to stop eating sugar. So very hard to trust yourself when you're around refined sugar. Whereas fruit and natural sugars, there's a few ways your body actually says stop eating. One, you have a lot of nutrients in those foods, so your body says, stop eating, I'm going to stop eating. Another way is, have you ever consumed too much fruit and spend too much time in the smallest room in the house? That's one way of nature saying, you probably overconsumed on this one. Share with your neighbors. Prior to consumption, that is. Unless, of course, you're into the whole healthy fecal transplant thing, but that's a whole other video we won't get into right now. So my guide for looking at sugars is which are the ones that are actually closest to nature and are sustainably procured, and obtained. So a lot of people think that maple syrup is a totally natural product, and it is, as in there's no additives to it, but it doesn't come out of the tree looking like this. It comes out as a much lighter syrup that gets cooked down, similar to the way that we actually cook down sugars to create refined sugar, the process before it actually turns into molasses. Now with cane juice, in its natural state, if you've ever been to a place where they crush it, there's a lot of work to crush cane in order to make juices from it. And most people I've spoken to, when I ask them, can you drink a lot of it? I know when I first had it, I couldn't even finish a full glass of it. It was just too much. And the body basically communicated that to you. There aren't a lot of people who can consume a lot of it without their body saying, I've had enough. It's because there's lots of nutrients in it. And just to give you an idea, the nutrients, the color, aroma, and flavor compounds, when we actually take large volumes of sugar and boil it all down, the extraction of the nutrients, the leftover, the byproduct of creating sugar is molasses. And you can see there's a lot in there. And in fact, some people refer to molasses as a health food and use it medicinally. So maple syrup is natural in the sense that it comes from nature, nothing added to it, but it doesn't come to you in this form. And I have a carcass of a maple syrup bottle that I wanted to show you because I have some of the sugars that have solidified. Essentially, if you've seen maple sugar, it's because the actual liquid has been dried up, and then you end up with this kind of sugary substance that they can then grind up into sugar you can use. And then there's coconut palm sugar, which is not to be confused with palm sugar. Now, coconut palm sugar is made with a simple two-step process of actually making a little cut into the flower of the coconut palm, and then they collect the liquid sap, and then basically that is placed under heat until all the water is evaporated, and you end up with this little sugar. So it's a very simple process, not too far from nature. Now, of all these sweeteners here, the only one that comes to you exactly as it is in nature is honey. But right now, we're actually facing a crisis with the use of honey and bees. So this is something we want to be super, super mindful of, that we're procuring this, if we're going to have honey, from people who are having direct relationships with the bees and are really respectful of that being a sustainable process. Most of the bees, most of the honey that we have right now that's being produced is basically made by drugging bees. So it's getting them to produce more honey. They're actually getting them to eat sugar water, which is not good for any, refined sugar water, which is not good for any species on the planet. And what it's doing is it's actually weakening the immune system of bees. So what will happen is that when they are threatened by certain mites or environmental threats, their system's already weakened because they're not actually getting true nourishment like they should be getting from natural things, like the nectars and flowers. It's not just as simple as choosing the sugar that has the lowest effect on your glycemic index. Obviously, if you're diabetic and your situation is really dicey, you have to be mindful of certain things. But highly refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, and some that are actually promoted as healthy products, even though they're white and highly refined, can create more problems than they solve. Okay, so you want to be mindful of it. So for Sweet Freedom, we're trying to look at where do we get the sweetness in life. Obviously, you get it from a lot of areas, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. But when you're choosing your sugars, you want to find the thing that is most easily to obtain in nature, the most sustainable, and in that, you're going to regulate your consumption if you're developing this healthy relationship with food. Everything else that's highly processed or boiled down from something else requires more resources from the planet. It requires more human resources and will require more resources from the body to then break down and deal with. So the bottom line for Sweet Freedom is we need to be informed, but beyond information, we also need to think critically. And it's an important thing not just to be told, oh, these sugars have low glycemic index, so you have these, they're all right, and these sugars are bad because, whatever, even though they're way more natural options. When you think critically for yourself and you combine that with credible information, and then you start to listen to your body, how your body feels, you're going to develop a different relationship with sugar. And if you're asking yourself, how would I get this in nature? What would I have to do? How much time would I have to sit beside a tree and then boil it down? You start to understand how we're meant to consume sugar in nature.